So welcome back to Restless. I'm Father Joseph, and this is Joe, and here we are in just a place at a time doing a thing.
Oh, yeah.
And
aren't we always?
This thing is called Restless, and so thanks for tuning in to Restless, where we restlessly seek the face of Christ in today's mixed up and crazy world. And, you know, something that God's been doing a lot in my spiritual life lately has been trying to get me to work on attachments. Or detachments, really, from attachments. And I mean, the world is filled with so many good things. You know, we have relationships, we have plans, we have the physical world and you know, the pleasures of this world, and all of which are good and all of which we're called to use, but to use properly. And I don't know, I find that that is far too easy for me to get attached to things, less like physical things. Like I'm not like big into like, you know, my clothes or anything. As you can see, I'm dressed like a slob a little bit, but you know, and I do get attached to people, and I do get attached to my plans and kind of how I see life unfolding. I don't know. Do you see attachments in your own life in any of these areas?
Yeah. I think, first of all, I think it's like fortuitous that we're talking about this at the tail end of Advent, which really is a period where we're asked, I think, to reflect on like the extent to which we're attached to our plans. I mean, that is in some ways the great victory of Mary and Joseph, is that they were able to detach from the plans they had for their lives, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean...
Oof, talk about a radical detachment.
Seriously, yeah. Yeah, I was just, you know, when we were doing our extensive planning for the show, you know, like remember 45 seconds ago when we started and finished that.
Don't tell people our secrets.
I was saying that for praying about your detachments is a big part of the 30-day Ignatian spiritual exercises, which I completed at the beginning of last summer. And going into it, I kind of thought, yeah, I mean, I kind of like creature comforts, and I probably am attached to something, but a lot of the time I was praying during the retreat, I couldn't figure out what it was I was attached to. It's funny, I realized that, like, definitely I'm attached in a lot of ways to plans, to people. In a big way, I realized I was attached to my vocation. Like I realized that I had become attached to the priesthood as such, meaning I attached to my idea of being a priest, and also attached to what I thought that was going to look like.
Yeah.
And for a variety of reasons, a variety of things that were going on in my life and are continuing to go on in my life, we're kind of calling into question the ability of some of those things to come to pass. And I realized that I was kind of panicking because this image of what I thought the priesthood would be, which I thought for sure I was going to have, was kind of slipping away. And that I might have to accept the priesthood on different terms than I had expected, on whatever terms God offers as opposed to the terms I wanted. And so I agree with you. I think we often think of detachments as attaching to technology or to, you know, good food. But yeah, I mean, attaching to even good things, to friends, to one's vocation, to, you know, anything.
Yeah. I mean, I always find attachments closely related to emotions.
Right.
In that, like, you know, it's not that I just enjoy being around people or enjoy this food or this situation, but it's like if it's ever taken away, I feel pretty devastated, like more so like blown out of proportion devastated. You know, I remember when I was in college, just out of college, a very good friend of mine who I went to college with and actually went to high school with, he died in a car crash.
Oh, man.
It was very sad. Yeah, like 22, 23 years old. And I remember going to the funeral though, and his mom, who was a very, very holy woman, she you know, we of course gave our condolences to her, and she said, you know, I'm just so grateful for the time that God allowed me to have Justin. And, you know, I don't know if that was a stock answer, you know, because everyone's, you know, wishing you well at that terrible time, but I always thought that was actually a really good definition of detachment. Like, you know, gratitude for the time that she had, the 23 years that she had with Justin, when in reality, I think most moms would be utterly devastated.
Yeah, and no doubt she was too.
Yeah, and I think both probably went simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think detachment is the same thing as... I don't think detachment means you want to get rid of something.
No,
you know,
not at all.
I think it's, you know, detachment ultimately, I think is a right ordering of things around you, including relationships. So it's like, you know, this is, you know, Jesus says, you're not fit to be his disciple unless you hate your mother and father. He doesn't mean like actually like feel hate towards them, right? He means like, you know, it's great to love your parents, but not more than Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, it's great to love other things. It's great to even love the life you lead or your vocation or, you know, your friends, but like in proper proportion to Jesus has to be, you know, that which you love and desire the most.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to sacrifice other things for that. Right.
Yeah. And it kind of detachment eliminates the fear of losing it. And that's something I'd be honest, I totally wrestle with all the time.
Yeah.
Is the feel like, well, what if it's all, what if tomorrow I wake up and, nobody ever invites me over again,
Sure.
or I, end up getting assigned to some parish in the inner city or like, where
Hard to imagine that would happen to you.
It did happen to me.
I know. Yeah,
It did.
I know. From you, I know. Yeah.
And I'll be honest, that was one of the harder days of my life when I got the phone call at St. Mary's in Bethel.
Yeah, I remember that day. You looked shell shocked.
Yeah, I was totally shell shocked, and in part because in my mind I was like, well, I just got ordained. I've been here for 1 year as a priest. It was 2 years as a deacon prior, but I was like, oh, great, I got like 3 or 4 more years here. These are my plans of what I want to do. And then not only was I taken away from there, I was put in pretty much the exact opposite position, from a nice suburban parish in a beautiful woodsy setting.
Bridgeport.
It was definitely a great parish, great pastor.
Yeah.
We got along great. And then put in this inner city parish where I didn't speak Spanish, and it was dirty and noisy. And I remember that night I was running this talk because we had I think we had somebody from the diocese coming and talking about annulments. So a few people came, just talk about annulments, and I remember like having to excuse myself. And right out front of St. Mary's in Bethel is a big cross, a big wooden cross that's right there. As soon as you drive in, you see it. And now it actually is a crucifix, has a corpus on it, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a cross at the time, and I just went out there and I'm like, God, I don't know if I can do this. Like it was so devastating, and that's when I realized, I'm too attached to this. And I shouldn't have been.
Sure.
But how does one grow in detachment without having it all taken away?
Yeah, right. That's
like God, give me detachment, but don't take it away.
one way. I think acknowledging that you're attached is a good first step. And again, you can be attached to good things.
Right. It's not a sin that I want.
Very good.
It was great.
And the plans you had would have been good.
And I saw so much fruit from it.
Yeah. And frankly, a lot of good things that didn't happen because you were transferred out of St. Mary's in Bethel.
Yeah.
But a lot of good things did happen because you were transferred to a lesser St. Mary's elsewhere in the diocese. And likewise, my image of what the priesthood was going to look like for me was nice.
Oh, sure. Saving souls and preaching and
I meant even more specific to me. Like I had this image, like I'm going to be able to I'll run around with the kids. I'll be able to play sports. I'll be able to do this, that, and the other thing. And then all of a sudden I started having these health problems. And I was like, well, maybe I can't do anything. Maybe I won't be able to do any of those things. Maybe I won't be able to be a priest at all. But even if I am, maybe it won't be like what I thought. Maybe I won't have energy like I had hoped, or this, that, or the other. And the reality is that, at least in my specific case, right? And also I think in your specific case, right? Like God will give you the grace to be the priest he wants you to be, right? And there's some version of that applies to all the other kinds of attachment. I think it's like, what if I lost all my friends today? I would be lonely. It's like, yeah, you would be, except for God would find a way to provide for you.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that, I don't know how you, I guess one way you can grow in detachment in some ways is giving good things up, in small ways. So like, for example, it's good to have friends. It's good to spend time with them, but maybe sometimes you just, what? I do want to go to that, but actually I can't tonight because I'm going to stay back and I'm going to pray or something like that. Or,
that's true.
Or money. Like it's not a bad thing to be successful and provide for your family, but maybe, you're too attached to it and giving away enough that it hurts a little bit.
Yeah, that's the key. It's got to hurt a little bit.
So I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think you're right. And
Great,
something you said, I think it hit me because I've often thought to myself, like, if I was in the situation that the martyrs were in, where deny your faith or we're going to kill you, I think to myself right now, wow, would I have the courage to do that? Well, the reality is right now I'm not being given the grace to do that because it's not in front of me.
Right.
But if it was in front of me, I trust that God will give me the grace to do it. Right. And so you're right that if God's asking you to take on this new ministry or to give up something that's important to you, he will give you the grace to do it.
Right. If you could be a martyr right now, that would mean that you didn't need God's grace to do it.
Right. That I would do it on my own efforts. Yeah. That's very true. Very true.
Also, God's pretty good at giving you opportunities to detach, I found.
Yeah.
So,
And I'll be honest, looking back, having moved out of St. Mary's in Bethel, and it was a really difficult 2 years in Stanford, really difficult. And, priests often say, oh, I've enjoyed every assignment I've had. And I was like, well, there was one that was a little tougher than most.
One.
But now looking back, 8 years past that, I see why it happened. Mm-hmm. Like there were so many things that needed to happen, not only in my life, but people I needed to meet.
Yeah.
And like opportunities that opened doors down there. Like I would not currently be chaplain of Cardinal Kung if I had not been assigned there to Stanford.
Yeah.
And as tough as it was, it's now bearing incredible fruit. Mm-hmm. And that's what I hope with all detachments, that when you open your hands are open so God can fill them with better things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those who sow in tears will reap. Will reap. What is it? Those who sow in tears will sin when they reap. Is one of the. This occurs a couple times in the scriptures, right? This idea.
Yeah.
Like sowing in tears and reaping in joy, or whatever.
Reaping in joy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, how much should I guess, like, what does attachment look like, and how do you know if you have too much? Because I mean, I feel like, especially if you're a parent and you have kids, you're attached to them. You should be attached to them, right? Is it ever possible to be too attached? I mean,
oh, of course, yeah. I mean, I think like maybe a good baseline is anything that you are so attached to that you would commit a sin to give it up, rather than give it up, or to avoid giving it up, would be a good place to start. So it's great to love your kids, but would you commit a sin for them? I mean, I hope not, right? Because that's not authentic Christianity. Yeah, but as tough as that sounds,
Which I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Silence or read the book.
I have watched the movie.
Did you?
Yeah.
I mean, because that's kind of that issue of like, okay, the life of the people you love, right? It's a movie set in Japan. I think it's fiction, right? Is it fiction?
I'm not sure. Or is it? It's a movie based on a book.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I read the book. I didn't see the movie.
Okay, the movie's not good.
It's not good?
Well, it's beautifully made. It's morally problematic, I would argue.
Well, that's the challenge, is that the issue is there's, a priest who's arrested for being Catholic in Japan in the late 1500s, and other Japanese are being put to death for his faith. And the question is, could he trample on a picture of Jesus in order to save their lives? And I won't give away the ending, but it brings up that more quantity, so life is a good thing. Your friends are a good thing. And,
right.
and seeing your friends flourish is a good thing, but is it a sin in that case to trample on that image of Jesus to save your friend's life? I mean,
yes.
Yeah, I agree too.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of detachment, like, if, I don't know. That's hard to have though.
Yeah. No, of course it is. And I mean, that's an extreme example, an extreme level of detachment, right? So I mean, I think the first step has to be just praying about it, just trying to asking God to really shine a light on what areas of my life am I attached to, and then I mean, that what that means is that it's probably a good thing that you're just overly fond of, and that's okay. You just have to kind of be aware of it and scale it back a little bit, and then keep an eye on it, I think.
Yeah. I think one thing that's helpful too for detachment is to realize that we're pilgrims here. And if you're on a pilgrimage, you're only taking the bare minimum with you on your back.
Sure.
A few couple changes of clothes and whatever. You're not making a permanent home. And that's the reality of this world, is it's very, very temporary. Yeah. Everything's temporary. Everything will get taken away from us at one point, at our death.
Sure. Right. Yeah, I mean, again, I just go back to like the image of Mary and Joseph in Advent. Right? I mean, Mary's response to God is not, exactly what you've described, I will now do, or it's not, yet having now heard everything, all your plans for me, I will do them. It's, be it done unto me according to your will. Without knowing what that will is, that's like the important thing. And so,
yeah, I don't know if she could have foreseen the cross at the moment that she gave her fiat.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there are elements of what was to come, which would have been been a surprise to her. I found this. You find this a lot sometimes in young adult communities, like a real attachment to their future as they think it should be, or their present as they think it should be. Attachment. I should be dating right now. I should be married right now. I should have this job. I should have that job. And it's like you need to just live in where you are. I mean, it's okay to have desires. It's okay to have ambitions. See for reference our episode on ambitions. But it's important to just like trust that God is guiding all of this. And I mean, I wanted to enter seminary many years before I did. And, had I entered seminary when I wanted to originally, the underlying in your minds when I wanted to recently, I think I'd be a deacon now.
That's true. 25. Yeah, you could be.
I'd be very close to being ordained a priest. But the problem is that it's when I wanted to enter seminary. It's not when when God wanted me to. And I've had so many experiences in the intervening years. I've learned things from having weird experiences, from developing relationships with people. Not just that, but I think that my classmates that I'm sim ordination class with now are just really tremendous people.
Good.
And so again, like I had my plan, what I wanted to do, but I think that God has. God knows, right? God knows what's best, and maybe that's another way that would be helpful to grow in detachment is try to think through your life, like prayerfully think through your life and try to identify those decisions which you help, or those things in your life which you wanted to come out differently, and which in retrospect, you're actually glad that they came out the way they did. I mean, you being assigned to the St. Mary's in Stanford, as opposed, transferred out of St. Mary's in Bethel, or you being forced to leave Archdiocese of Baltimore, right? I mean, imagine what your life would be like if you hadn't done that, right?
Definitely.
Imagine what my life, so many people's lives would be, you know what I mean? So I think sometimes it's good to just reflect on the ways in which God has taken care of us, even when we were kicking and screaming, and then maybe helps us be more sober about it in the moment,
That's true. But I think one of the hardest things that especially for a lot of young adults to discern is, what if you feel God calling you in one direction and all the doors keep closing? For example, all the young adults that, feel God calling them to marriage, and they really genuinely feel it in prayer. Yeah. And it seems like, they're 35 now and they haven't met the right guy, or they feel this certain line of work is for them and they just can't seem to get a job in that industry. Or like, at what point do you just say, well, I give up trying? Or
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd be curious to hear what you think, because I just think you can't speak universally about very individualized situations.
Yeah, that's true. That's certainly true.
Maybe you are called to be a husband, but the first problem is that you're a jerk and you need to find a way to be a better person before you're going to get married. No, honestly though, you know what I mean? It's like, I feel called to marriage, but no one wants to date me. It's like, okay, well, those two thoughts aren't necessarily a contradiction. Maybe you need to be better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or maybe you actually aren't called. Maybe you're wrong about what your prayer is telling you. I mean, there's no, you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
How do you counsel people in these situations?
Well, one thing that helped me to understand is, some men, for example, are called to seminary, but not to priesthood.
Yeah.
Some people are called to the dating life, perhaps, but not to marriage.
Sure.
And that can, so it's kind of an interesting unfolding. For me, I've always said and maybe this is right or wrong, I don't know, but I've always said it's okay to give God an ultimatum when talking about your plans. Like say, for example, like I've been trying to, I don't know, break into the music industry or something, and okay, I'm going to try for one more year, and then it'll be clear that it's not your will if at the end of the year I haven't made any progress. Or something like that.
Yeah, I think to some extent that's really giving yourself an ultimatum and not God. But yeah, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, it's otherwise like, what, do you want to be 75 and still pursuing your dream? Because it's hard to know God's will sometimes.
And the problem is that it's your dream. Like maybe your dream is what God wants too, or maybe some version of your dream is what God wants too.
Yeah.
But if you're only just single-mindedly focused on fulfillment of your dream, right? That's not the Christian life. And the Christian life is a willingness to sacrifice whatever your dream is for God's vision for your life.
Yeah, but only if only God's vision would be clearer.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
That's the hard thing. Father Brett Brandon, who was the vice rector of the seminary when I was there down in Mount St. Mary's, would always have this great prayer. He said, "Gentlemen, pray every day, Lord, help me to want what you want."
Yeah.
Because it's really a reorienting of desires, saying like, I have my plans, but I don't know if they're your plans, Lord, so help me to want what you want.
Yeah.
Change my desires if they're not yours.
Yes, although at the same time, that's obviously a great point. But at the same time, one of the points that was really hammered into us during the 30-day retreat was St. Ignatius of Loyola would say, there is no prayer without desire, right? So you would pray with your desires because they're not coming from nothing. So
yeah.
It might be that God is speaking to you. What am I called to? It's like, well, let's think about that for a second. You fantasize about saying the Mass. You love altar serving. You've dated a little bit but never been really fulfilled in it. Gee, what is God calling you to? It's like, pay attention to your desires. Or maybe it's like, yeah, I think the priesthood's really cool. I think it's a beautiful vocation. I would love to be able to say Mass, but I just can't get over this feeling that I'm meant to be a biological father. Okay, well then pay attention to your desires. And so, obviously I think you're right. We should pray for our desires to be perfected, but that doesn't mean that they have to be obliterated.
No, of course not.
I think God really does speak to us through our desires, through our reactions to things that happen. It's like, oh, geez, I just feel myself tensing up when that just happened. Maybe there's something I have to pray about there. I think that's how God speaks to us often.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. That it's not an elimination of desire; it's a reorientation of desire according to His will, which is sometimes very hard to discern. But He often does speak to us through the desires on our hearts. And that I think is not only true in talking about like detachment from our plans, but even like attachment versus detachment from friends and people in your life. That like, I think there's you're called to spend time with people that fulfill you. Mm-hmm. That I think is a good thing. And so that do pay attention to the people that do fulfill you, because a lot of people you deal with on a daily basis drain you of a lot of resources and energy.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when you love someone, and we were talking earlier on that episode about friendship. Mm-hmm. When you love someone, it's not a clinging love. It's not a love ultimately about self-satisfaction, but recognizing the other as an individual that you have no right to possess.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that one of the consequences of true detachment is like a true freedom. Like if you think like if you're attached to a friend or like a version of friendship with one person, you're not entering into that relationship freely because you're being like constrained and governed by these desires that you have that are not necessarily going to accord with reality. And so, you end up making the perfect the enemy of the good and, missing out on good opportunities and good things, and maybe even other good friendships because you're so monomaniacally focused on this one thing that I feel like I have to have. I have to have not just a friendship with this person, they have to be my best friend. Like I have to be their best friend. We have to do these things together. It's like,
have to get constant affirmation.
Right. And like, it's not enough that we see each other once a month. I need to see him every week. He needs to text me back when I text him. Like, it's like, okay, but if you can detach from that a little bit, you realize that then you can actually be free to like receive the love this person's giving you and then actually give them your own love, right? Like this freedom is only possible if you don't feel like you need this thing, right? Because you're not free if you're interacting with something that you feel like you absolutely need to have no matter what, then you're not going to act freely.
That's not freedom. Yeah,
right,
exactly. Yeah. That's addiction or codependency or something like that. But I find that it's harder to do that when you don't sense God's presence. Because I think, St. Thomas Aquinas said that human beings cannot live without joy or delight. I think he used the word delight. And he said later on that if a man doesn't find delight in spiritual things, he'll find delight in carnal things, not bad things, just earthly things. And that's the tough part is when you turn to prayer because you're like, Lord, you are my one and only, and you feel so empty. And so then you turn to like, well, I need something to fill me. And you turn to people or possessions or plans or, this or that. When in reality, I think we have to sit with the emptiness. Because in faith, we say, Lord, I know that you are my one and only. I know that you're the only one that I truly love. And even though I don't feel it right now, you're still the only one I love.
Yeah, that's right. And I find myself a lot being like, God, I know that I should feel this way. I want to feel this way. But I don't feel this way. Like I want to feel this way, right? And so like however attenuated it needs to be. So it's like, okay, I want to do your will.
Yeah.
In this moment, I really don't want to do your will. But like it's okay to like admit that. God knows it, so you can't hide it. But like,
Lord, I'm struggling right now.
So acknowledge that reality. It's like, God, like just like please help me to want to serve you. Help me to want to serve you.
Want to.
Yeah, as far back as you need to go.
As many wants as you need.
Yeah. Like God, I want my desires to be perfected in you. I want to know what you want for my life, and I want to want what you want for my life. But I'm not there right now.
Right.
Like that's okay as long as you're acknowledging it as a reality, and then you're asking for God's grace to move you in the right direction.
And then the flip side, the connection side of that is to acknowledge the emotional attachments to things, people, and plans. Because that's a lot of times that I go to pray and I, can't stop thinking about the exciting thing I'm doing with my friends that weekend, or, can't stop thinking about the excitement of, recording a new album, which I'm doing right now. And I'm like, wait a second, I should be praying. Hold on.
Right.
But it's so consuming the mind, it's so consuming the will and the emotions that you just have to bring that to God and say, God, I want you to be my one and only.
Yeah.
I'm really struggling with that right now.
Yeah. Again, on the subject of, detaching from good things, like one good thing you could become attached to if you got it all the time was actually hearing God's voice directly answering your prayers, right? Which is why that's not what he does. Right? Yeah. So you have to be willing to say, like, you know what, I'm not entitled to God's answer right now.
Yeah.
And that can't be a crutch. Like he if God's pulling back from you a little bit, it's because, and maybe in part, it's because he wants you to try to be detached from this too. Like not detached from the relationship with God. That's obviously foundational, but detached from the from the validation of what prayer should be, or what God's will should be, what God's response should be, right? So like that, because that attachment can be bad too. You know what I mean?
I was watching a documentary yesterday. When I do my workouts, I watch YouTube documentaries about different things and learned so much through them. And one of them was about this road through Siberia. That's like considered one of the most dangerous roads in the world, where it's like 700, 1,200 kilometers, and it's unpaved and muddy, and people die on it all the time. And at a certain point, at a peak of a mountain, there's an altar to a pagan deity, because I guess that whole region is still very pagan, very spiritism. Like they worship like their ancestors, naturalism. Yeah. And so people would leave offerings there. And that's, I think, such a far cry from our relationship with God, that it's in their faith, it's, I will leave an offering if you protect my journey. Right. It's like it's a give and take. And in our relationship with God, sometimes we are tempted to that. God, I'll pray if you make it easy, if it feels good, if it, et cetera. But when he takes that away, that's when it becomes a real relationship, which is not an exchange, but a real, walking with Christ, even in the dark moments. And
Yeah.
it really struck me that, that's one of the things we can be attached to is the good feelings in prayer.
Yeah. Detach from the vibes, man. Detach from the vibes.
That seems to be our word of the day, the vibes.
Vibes
man.
are important.
The vibes.
Foundational to the Christian life.
The vibes. Yeah, it's detachment is hard, but it's also freeing.
Yeah.
Because it means being reattached to that which is the source and summit. And I don't think it's not just for priests. I think it's for lay people too, to have a healthy right attachment,
right?
Whereby if God asks you to give up anything, you can do it. I was reading a story about, so of course here in Connecticut, we're right here about 7 miles from Sandy Hook. And one of the women, Jennifer Hubbard from Sandy Hook, lost one of her daughters there. And she was a very devout Catholic. And she was saying that on that day, she went to the firehouse, hoping to see her daughter. And she kept praying over and over again, Lord, bring her home, bring her home, bring her home. And she realized later on when the daughter didn't come home that God had actually answered the prayer. He did bring her home. I thought that was really profound, sombering, but like that was the kind of detachment, so painful, but to say like, it's not my child.
Yeah.
It's the Lord's child.
That's really beautiful. I'm thinking of one of your songs. I think it's titled Between Two Worlds, right?
Love but not to cling.
Yeah.
Use but not to own.
The specific vibe.
Vibe. You're on your vibes today.
Specific lyrics, set of lyrics. I'm thinking of our like I long to something or other, but I love this dust and what.
I long for heaven, but I love this dust and sand.
Yeah, and that's like I think that's the tension the Christian lives in. I pray about this with some degree of frequency. It's like, yeah, I do desire heaven, but it's a pretty sweet gig down here. You know what I mean? And it's like there's a lot left to do. I think, and I hope for my life. And I don't think it's wrong to desire that. To desire to continue living, to desire to have a priestly ministry one day. In my case,
right.
But I think also again it has. But this isn't our home.
And all of the good things should remind us of that. I had some friends who were at Franciscan, it attracts very devout Catholics, and some were kind of more sentimentally devout. And this one guy, I remember we were on a hike one day, and he's like, the sky reminds me of Our Lady because it's blue and it covers the whole world, but it allows the sun to shine through. And at the time I was like, that is so cheesy. But now I'm like, actually, that was really deep because he's using the created order to bring him to a supernatural reality. And that's what we should always do as Christians. When we're having a banquet, that should be a reminder of the eternal banquet feast of heaven. When we're spending time with friends, that reminds us that the saints await us.
Yeah.
So this whole world is imbued with a sense of the supernatural, if we have eyes to see, and the heart that's detached enough to cling to that which will never end. So I love some of the prayers of Advent. There's one prayer after communion that we pray, especially during the first 2 weeks of Advent. It says, even now as we walk amidst passing things, you teach us by them to love the things of heaven and to hold fast to what eternally endures.
Beautiful.
It's one of my most favorite prayers the whole year because we do walk amidst passing things. They're good, they're passing.
Right.
And something greater is coming. And that's what our hearts should be hanging on. In fact, here's a shameless plug because with this new album, I have a song called.
Because I don't know if you heard that he's recording a new album.
Yeah, if I haven't said it, if I haven't said it 1,000 times,
which he has old albums, but this is a new album.
Yeah, drops in probably July 2024. Check it out on Spotify.
Yeah, no big deal, but
no big deal. Just have a listen,
or just buy it.
You don't have to buy it. Nobody buys albums anymore. It's all streaming, right? And every time someone streams, they get 0.0001 cent.
Nice.
Yeah. You need a lot of streams to make any money, but that's okay. It's not about the money. It's about the Lord. But one of the songs is called Anchor Me. Anchor me on the other side, that as I walk here, keep my heart anchored so that it doesn't move from heaven, from what I really long for. Because this world is so changeable. All right. I think we covered it.
That's it. We're
awesome.
Done. Let's detach from this episode.
Yeah, let's detach from this episode. Absolutely. Anyway, thanks for joining us on this episode of Restless. You can find us on Veritas Catholic Network, 1350 AM and 103.9 FM. Tune in next time. God bless.